Back with you tonight, and the conversation continues. The Public Service Commission has announced that government employees will undergo lifestyle audits from February next year. The Commission says all public servants, including ministers, premiers and MECs, will be subjected to these checks in order to ensure the integrity in public administration. Joining me to talk about this is Public Service Commissioner Dr. Somadoda Fikeni and SAFTU's General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us tonight here on In Focus. Dr. Fikeni, let's start with you. I mean, the thinking around this is almost as if this will be a silver bullet to catch people who are living beyond their means and therefore begin to ask questions. Hold on a second. How come you can afford that car? How come you can afford that house with this type of income? I mean, is that the kind of solution that will bring about the integrity we seek in public service?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, and good evening to the viewers, good evening to the fellow panelist, Mr. Vavi. All I can say is that we are faced with a serious crisis of pandemic or endemic corruption, rather. And therefore, lifestyle audit is something that the public, trade unions, civil society organizations had been calling for. Now that it is finally going to take root, and the Department of Public, Service and Administration has been leading and coordinating efforts of developing guidelines and implementation plan for this exercise. We as Public Service Commission welcome this not as a silver bullet, but as one of the most vital exercises in ensuring ethical conduct, in ensuring transparency, and also in inviting all different law enforcement and any other watchdog organizations to bring to the fore the information whenever you see some discrepancies between the lifestyle of a person and what they might be earning, and there is no explanation to that effect. So it is not a silver bullet, but it is a very important tool in a toolbox in fighting the scourge of corruption.
I agree with you, of course. The scourge of corruption quite endemic and has been a problem for a while now in the country. However, it has taken now 7 years for government to finally reach this point and introduce this particular instrument. You would know, I mean, the word sometimes that you use is that the criminals become sophisticated in how they are stealing from their public purse. And they would have now found ways of how to avoid those very pertinent questions around their lifestyle. For example, to say, oh, well, it's actually my uncle who owns this. It's not in my name. And how does this instrument detect that kind of corruption?
Well, I do think that what is most important is that there are different agencies globally, including the United Nations Agency on, drugs and crime fighting, as well as international experts that were brought in to assist our government in crafting this. So those agencies do keep track of the changes, whether it's a cyber crime or different formats of hiding monies and so forth. So their guidance in this instance would not give us some outdated, ways of tracking lifestyle and how people hide what they have. They would give us what is the latest. They would even anticipate how the bad elements would actually try to hide with that cousin, with that aunt, and in any other form or shape. So this has been an effort coordinated where international agencies and some of national experts were brought, in to assist technically. So that gives us comfort to say, because there have been delays, we won't be trying to solve the problem of 2013 in 2021.
Dr. Vavi, welcome. The audits will focus on all workers in public service. Let's start on that comment, but it will also go further, focus on ministers and mayors and premiers and everybody else within those higher ranking positions. What is your immediate reaction to that announcement?
Well, this is one of the best news to get as we go towards this break of 2021 in a year that has been such a terrible year for South Africa, with us battling unemployment, coronavirus, and rampant criminality in society, and many other social ills that are associated with poverty and inequalities that South Africa has now begun to be accustomed to. And so we're quite excited. We quite warmly welcome this intervention. And some of us, I remember I made this call whilst I was the General Secretary of the then powerful COSATU many years ago. And we were attacked, we were ridiculed, we were told that SARS is already conducting lifestyle audit by the presidents of that time, the deputy presidents, and we were told that this is going to happen in the sky, not in South Africa. After so many years, we're now going to see this call we made then coming to an effect come February in 2022. We're quite excited and we're quite happy that the voices of the people in the trade unions, in civil society, and many progressive anti-corruption formations within the government, within the ruling party, have finally have something to celebrate. That is very significant. As you are saying, Mdu is not going to be a silver bullet. This is an important milestone in a long journey against corruption and greed. But the crooks who wants to live beyond their means, the means of their own salaries, will always find a way to beat any form of legislation or intervention. For example, what you're going to have to see now is a phenomenon where people are not going to be buying those Porsche cars with 1.5, 3 million, 4 million Porsches. And they're going to find a way of buying those through the family members and only borrow them over the weekend. They will not buy houses that cost way above their means, but they are going to register those houses in the name of a distant family member, and when they retire, they will go to their nest. So there will be always other ways of beating this progressive legislation. The point that, however, that I think Professor Somadoda Fikeni is making is that we must make it more and more difficult for them to insult us, to just flout that anger, that opulence, and that class materialism, and rub it in our face as they currently do it. And at least that's not going to be easy for them to do so. People will have to be very creative to beat this intervention. Lastly, more important, at the beginning, there was an attempt to narrow the application to just public servants. We are so thrilled that this is now going to include the executive at all levels. So it's not going to be ministers who say to the public servants, do as I preach, whilst they're doing the opposite. The ministers themselves now are going to have to explain where they get money to spend hundreds of thousands in Cubana, day in, day out, weekend in, weekend out. How we wish that could be extended to all members of the civil society formations, by the way, because corruption now have extended to the trade unions, to the churches, to important NGOs, in society.
Yeah.
But this is a
why do you think this particular instrument will be more effective, right? For example, you've already mentioned that you were convinced all along that the existing financial disclosure frameworks that were there, for example, SARS and so on and so forth, for example, in Parliament, you've got to declare and your interest so that conflict of interest could be picked up. Why do you think this will be different?
This regular conducting, I hope that you can hear me because
yes.
It looks like the regular conducting of a lifestyle audit on everybody and will at least put everybody on check. Everybody will have to disclose information independently. Everybody is going to have to account how it comes that whereas you are earning 801 million rands, but you can afford a house of 4 million, 10 million, a car of 3 million, 4 million, or all your kids in the private school, all of your holidays are in Mauritius and in the French beaches or somewhere in Atlanta in the United States. Somebody is going to now to have to check all of that and to reconcile them with your income. If you cannot explain your income against your own lifestyle, then it will mean that there is a rat smelling right there. And SARS must then come in to do its job. And where you are disclosing in Parliament, you're going to have to be a reconciliation between what we have disclosed in Parliament as your income and your lifestyle. And I can tell you from the stories we're getting, the manner in which guys are flouting anger, opulence, and crass materialism culture that have taken over important echelons of the leadership, this instrument is going to come very, very handy. We have no doubt about it.
We'll get more on this instrument when we continue next from Commissioner Dr. Somadoda Fikeni and how exactly they will be able to get the financial profile of the public servants, but also the independence of the ethics officers and the training that they will undergo. More on that when we continue next. Stay with us. Come back live with us tonight on In Focus. The Public Service Commission taking that decision that as for February 2022, they'll be conducting lifestyle audits beginning with their employees and the commissioners themselves, and of course extending to all public servants, including ministers, premiers and mayors, all holding public office. Let's get a little bit more from Commissioner Dr. Somadoda Fikeni. How are you, Dr. Fikeni, going to be able to capture the various financial profiles of the public servants?
Maybe this is an opportunity to clarify that the Public Service Commission itself will not be conducting these lifestyle audits, even though it will subject itself as one amongst the first ones to that. There are people who are being trained with technical skills to do this in each one of the departments, nationally, provincially. And this will also involve multi-sectoral collaboration. The Department of Public Service and Administration has in its website, given the guidelines to this effect and the rollout of this project. And people have been trained by some of these multidisciplinary agencies who will be ethics officers and do this kind of work. So our part, where it becomes very important as charged in terms of our mandate of Chapter 10 of the Constitution, is to make sure that we monitor and evaluate the implementation and the effectiveness of this, because the problem in South Africa is that it's not for the lack of initiatives, it's not for the lack of policies, but the implementation aspect, to see to it that once implemented, it is done the manner it was intended to be. And also we can advise, where we see that some of the implementation have challenges.
Yes.
That's where we will now be very much vigilant, because we're also charged to make sure that public service is ethical.
Yeah.
But we work with the Department of Public Service and Administration, and we do our distinctive roles, which are also complementary.
Now, this is South Africa, of course. The next question that many people will ask, who will watch the watchdogs, right? You've got 46 trained officers, ethics officers. I mean, how are you going to guarantee their independence? People are saying already, oh, we are seeing red flags here.
Well, I do think that the country itself is wary of people being appointed on the basis of patronage or loyalty. That's why the watchful eye of the public itself, of the watchdogs, of the different agencies becomes very important. That's why even the Public Service Commission itself will be watching very closely to make sure that what is promised, what is implemented, is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And should people see or find any other thing that suggests otherwise, again, the Public Service Commission is but one of many agencies that they can approach. We have the MOU with the NPA. We have the MOU with the Public Protector, with multiple agencies, to make sure that when certain things are not being done or something is not being done right, once reported, we either investigate it or pass it on to those agencies.
The standard answer, Tatu Vavi, that you will get, similar to what you get with the SIU, is that no, this is a witch hunt because someone is trying to deal with me politically. I have acquired these assets in an honest manner. And how are we going to deal with that particular situation?
Yeah, in South Africa, Crook specializes on that. Every time they are being held to account, they always take out that card. There's a political witch hunt against me. I'm being persecuted, and in that way, they suddenly you will find a wall of psychopaths defending them, and the beneficiaries, by the way, jump up and organize marches, and to say our men from our village, our province, who speaks our own language is being handled by so and so in the organization. We must always be careful about that. The more, by the way, these things are happening, the more that our people get educated to know that political hyenas will always find a way of protecting themselves using the political cards and as a very important instrument. So we must be wary about that. What we must worry, though, is about the question. The question you are asking to the good professor, who's going to be watching the watchdog? I mean, in our country, let's face it, we have reached a point where there is hardly any institution left unscarred by the current levels of endemic corruption. No police, no SIU, no hawks, and even heavy allegations against judiciary itself, even though nobody has produced a concrete evidence, and no one have not been impacted upon. The agenda of corruption, this whole notion that you cannot do any business with the state, you cannot receive any kind of service from the state without greasing a hand of some corrupt official, is so endemic in our country that you begin to lose hope that even the best instruments will be corrupted themselves. And I think this is the area that will require not just the Public Service Commission, good professor, but the entire honest civil society, progressive civil society to be mobilized. Of course, there will always be challenges. Family members are going to report each other when they are jealous about the advances, the social advances being made by the other person born out of a cousin they never liked. They're going to report false allegations of wealth that cannot be explained. There will be all manner of problems. But if this society is mobilized, inspired by this, we will go a long way of getting that very important partnership between ordinary people, the watchdogs, the real honest watchdogs, that our people are working with all of the other institutions that will help enforce this to be realized and to be an instrument that we can rely on going forward.
Yeah. I can imagine, Dr. Fikeni, that this is going to be quite a mammoth task, not going to be conducted by the Public Service Commission, as you put it, but I mean, you've got millions of public servants that you would need to be putting through this system. I don't know if you did say what will happen once the investigations have been finalized and maybe there are adverse findings. Where are they handed to?
Well, there are law enforcement agencies besides reporting to the concerned department which should investigate, whether it's your financial intelligence and so forth. And if you can't explain such wealth, you simply actually charge the person or find mechanisms to force the person to disclose. And consequence management becomes very important, or law enforcement. That is why for this to work, all organs of the state, all organs of civil society, private sector, you name it, ought to be vigilant. Right now, we are a country on its knees on many fronts. Economically, we are borrowing heavily and so forth from outside. We can ill afford to bleed further where corruption is taking money mainly from the poor. And each time government says we have a fiscal challenge, you're beginning to see taxes going up, levies going up, and people are made to pay. So it is everybody's business to make a watchful eye and report where they can see wrong things, because it's not government's money. It's your money as a taxpayer that government is holding in trust and providing services. And when it falls short, it is every one of us who have to pay the heavy price. And it is every one of us who has a relative who may not get a job and so forth. So I like the point that my fellow panelist, Mr. Vavi, is saying, to say it should not just be left to government alone, because many of the institutions of government are still trying to recover. But even civil society itself, sometimes you find that even churches have become a crime scene of looting. The private sector the same. If we were to internalize this across society, that is the reason why Public Service Commission is beginning to say, let's just move beyond a rules-based society, but into a value-based society, because we lack that ethical code, that moral code, where something that is wrong, and we are able to actually see it as such. We don't use it as a political football one way or the other. Yeah. Because ultimately it is in the public good to have ethical leadership, to have ethical public service. It will help reduce corruption with all other measures, of course, combined. It will have a cumulative effect that is positive if implemented, because that's the key word. In South Africa, we have a grave side of policies, well-meaning, which hardly ever see implementation. Yeah. Because those who benefit from chaos would prefer to sustain chaos, and they will find many reasons not to get some of these policies implemented. And once implemented, agencies such as the Public Service Commission, working with all other watchful agencies, should make sure that they have an eagle eye watching whether these are done the way they are supposed to be done.
Now, do you envisage that you would need to navigate a degree of legal restrictions and maybe nuances in implementing this particular piece of policy, and maybe some of the findings as well being challenged in some courts of law?
In a constitutional democracy, of course, you must be able to give people the space to review and challenge, so that anything that is done is not abused. That is why public education and consultations and educating those who will be subjected to this becomes very important, so that they don't say we did not know. And people are free to challenge on the grounds where they can demonstrate. And by the way, you must, in lifestyle audit, be able to tell if it's your spouse or your children who are your benefactors, and therefore that's the reason why. And that then leads to the collaboration of different institutions which will check if indeed those people are doing what they are supposed to. And it may even help the taxmen and the taxwomen who are collecting taxes, because these lifestyles which are outside the gaze of law, the gaze of formal institutions, it's where you have a lot of money changing hands without anyone being subjected to taxation, as ordinary people are.
Dr. Somadoda Fikeni, appreciate your time. Zwelinzima Vavi, thank you very much for coming through and joining us tonight here on In Focus.